Mongolia, a vast carpet of wild, unexplored lands, echoes stories of a grand past and a living culture that pulses to this day. Its steppes seem endless, sheltering not only a stunning landscape, but also a curiosity of history that few know in depth. It is a place where tradition meets the present, where the ancient mystery of history unfolds silently beneath the biting winds. The first thing you notice when exploring its vastness is how much Mongolian culture has preserved over the centuries, weaving its enigma in an almost untouched way. Since the times of Genghis Khan, Mongolia has been much more than just a country. It was the center of an empire that challenged the world. But it's not just this grandiose story that captivates us. As we delve into its roots, we discover secrets that speak of a society deeply connected to its traditions, where love and human relationships play a central role. It is no wonder that the curiosities of Mongolian history continue to fascinate scholars and curious people from all over the world, eager to unravel its mysteries. Life in ancient Mongolia was marked by a unique social structure, reflecting a combination of freedom and discipline. Love customs, for example, reveal a little explored side of the country's history. Although many may imagine a rigid and patriarchal society, the reality is much more complex, with nuances that surprise even the most attentive. Here, relationships were as vast as the plains, and the role of women carried an importance that defied the expectations of many foreign observers. And so, as we delve deeper into the traditions and customs of this fascinating country, we are led to reflect on how these loving customs have shaped society over the centuries. How do practices that began millennia ago still resonate in modern Mongolian life? The answer is rooted in her story, one that has not disappeared but continues to reveal itself in unexpected ways. The history of Mongolia begins long before its name echoed across the corners of the world, rooted in the immense steppes and winds that told secrets of ancient nomadic tribes. With the rise of the Mongol Empire, under the leadership of the legendary Genghis Khan, the country transformed into one of the largest and most influential empires the world has ever seen. Each piece of land holds a mystery of history, full of battles, conquests, and alliances, which shaped not only Mongolia, but also distant regions. It is no surprise that his career continues to be an inexhaustible source of historical curiosity. The Mongol Empire, at its height, was known for its relentless expansion and a unique system of governance where respect for tradition coexisted with military and political innovations. Genghis Khan not only united nomadic tribes, but also built cultural bridges that spanned continents. This legacy of unification and conquest left deep marks on Mongolian traditions, which to this day carry the essence of a resilient and proud people. The history of Mongolia is, without a doubt, a riddle of history, a puzzle with pieces that date back to time immemorial. Despite changes over the centuries, many Mongolian traditions have survived, passing from generation to generation. Nomadism, for example, is still an important part of the people's identity, a living heritage from their ancestors who roamed the endless steppes. Relations between clans and families also remain central, reflecting a social structure that values cohesion and mutual respect. These traditions, while connecting us to the past, challenge us to understand how the Mongols managed to preserve their essence throughout so many eras. And now, when we look at modern Mongolia, it is possible to see how these historical elements still permeate everyday life. Although external influences have shaped the nation in many ways, Mongolia's heart remains true to its origins. Ancient traditions are echoed in relationships, culture, and even romantic customs, which continue to evolve, maintaining a deep link with the past. In ancient Mongolia, the social structure was strongly determined by the balance between men and women, with clearly defined but surprisingly complementary roles. Men, known for their military and hunting skills, dominated the political and defense scene, while women played an essential role at the heart of domestic and economic life. Although, at first glance, it might seem like a patriarchal society, the truth is that female power was felt intensely and respected. The curiosity of the story lies in how these gender dynamics shaped such a powerful civilization. Family relationships in Mongolia were structured in a way that ensured clan cohesion and survival, and marriage played a central role in this process. More than a simple love union, marriage was a strategic alliance that strengthened ties between tribes and families. These unions were carefully negotiated, involving a complex network of traditions and expectations that guaranteed social stability. A true enigma of history that reveals how much these practices influenced the development of Mongolian society. Over the centuries, romantic customs and family relationships in Mongolia evolved, reflecting the social and political changes that the country went through. What has not changed, however, is the importance of the family as the central nucleus of social life. Even in times of war, when men went off to battle, women kept the clan running, managing land, livestock, and important decisions. This duality between male and female roles is one of the great curiosities of Mongolian history, something that still fascinates scholars to this day. And so, by delving deeper into these ancient dynamics, we can see how Mongolian customs not only shaped their society, but also the way relationships and responsibilities evolved over time. This look at the past leads us to reflect on the role of women and their influence within Mongolian culture, something that will be explored later. In Mongolian culture, women's power has always been much deeper than it seems at first glance. In a society seemingly dominated by men, women have found ways to exert influence and leadership, often in discreet but always fundamental ways. Matriarchy, although not explicitly declared, was manifested in family decisions, in the administration of possessions, and even in political issues. It is fascinating to observe how, throughout history, Mongolian women shaped the destinies of their clans, a curiosity of history that few recognize. Women in leadership positions were not rare in ancient Mongolia. From influential queens to strategic advisors, women played crucial roles in the empire's defining moments. A notable example is Toragin Khatun, who ruled the Mongol Empire for a period, showing that female power was not only permitted but essential at critical times. These historical figures are enigmas of history that reveal how, even in times of war and expansion, the role of women was vital to the success and continuity of the empire. The impact of women's contributions goes beyond politics. In the cultural field, women were responsible for maintaining traditions, transmitting knowledge and teachings from generation to generation. They not only managed their homes and properties, but were also the guardians of Mongolian histories, customs, and spirituality. It was through them that the essence of Mongolia continued to live, a heritage that survives to this day. This mystery of history makes us reflect on how much women shaped the identity of an entire nation. And now, as we look at these influences, we see that the role of women in Mongolian culture is a centerpiece for understanding the complexity of romantic and social relationships in Mongolia. What follows is a deep dive into the love customs that reflected this interplay between tradition and feminine power. Amorous customs in Mongolia have always reflected the freedom and flexibility of a society shaped by its vast landscapes and nomadic traditions. Love and relationships were often seen as something fluid, where the bond between a man and a woman was not limited to the rigid norms that many other cultures imposed. For the Mongolians, life in constant motion required a more open view of love and marriage, something that resonates to this day. This curiosity of Mongolian history challenges our conventional notions of what a traditional romantic relationship is. If we compare Mongolian customs with other cultures, we will see stark differences. While many societies in the past placed immense weight on the formalities of marriage and the restricted role of women, Mongolia seemed to flow in the other direction. Polyamory, for example, was a common practice among some groups, challenging norms that many would consider immutable. Not only that, but women often had greater freedom in choosing their partners, something that, in many cultures, would be unthinkable. These nuances are part of the mystery of the story that continues to intrigue those who study Mongolia. Even with modernization, many of these ancient love customs can still be found in the more rural areas of Mongolia, where life follows a different rhythm than the urban one. Respect for traditions, combined with a more relaxed view of Western norms, creates a unique blend that defies expectations. In urban areas, the changes are most notable, with globalization bringing new ideas and, at the same time, leading Mongolians to question how much of their ancestral practices should still be maintained. This is a clear example of how history and modernity collide, creating an enigma that continues to evolve. And so, by understanding these practices, we begin to realize that relationships in Mongolia are much more complex than they seem. Polyamory, a practice that is now a topic of discussion in various parts of the world, has deep roots in Mongolian history, something we will see below. The concept of polyamory in Mongolia is an ancient practice that reflects flexibility in romantic relationships within a nomadic society. Polyamory, far from being a modern novelty, has its roots in centuries-old traditions where multiple relationships were accepted and even encouraged in some regions of the country. This openness allowed people to maintain emotional ties with more than one partner, a characteristic that, for many, would be seen as a mystery of Mongolian history. Polyamory there was not just a personal choice, but also a reflection of the social and economic dynamics of the time. The practice of polyamory in Mongolia is deeply linked to nomadism and survival needs. In a society where families needed to collaborate to ensure survival on the steppes, having multiple partners was a way to create stronger bonds between different family groups. In this way, polyamory became a tool to strengthen alliances and guarantee the safety of clans. This enigma of history shows how often the social and environmental context shapes the loving practices of a people. Examples of famous polyamorous relationships in Mongolia include stories of tribal leaders who, in addition to their wives, maintained other relationships, creating a network of support and cooperation between different families. These leaders not only followed these practices for pleasure, but also as a strategic way to maintain cohesion among their followers. This type of relationship, widely accepted at the time, was seen as a natural part of Mongolian life. To this day, there are rural areas where polyamory, although not practiced in the same way, still carries the memory of these traditions. And now, as we better understand polyamory in Mongolia, we begin to see how this practice has influenced other traditions, such as wedding rituals and marriage negotiations. The Mongolian wedding, with all its peculiarities, is the next step on this journey of discovery. A wedding in Mongolia is a ceremony rich in tradition, reflecting centuries of nomadic culture and family alliances. Much more than a simple union between two people, marriage involves the entire clan, with complex negotiations that can include dowry, the exchange of gifts, and even rituals that date back to the times of the Mongol Empire. In every detail, there is a hidden story, an enigma of history that reveals how loving relationships are intertwined with ancestral traditions. The wedding celebration is a crucial moment in the lives of Mongolians, marking not only the union of the bride and groom, but the strengthening of alliances between families. Rituals and traditions vary between regions, but a common element is the presence of dowry, a custom that still prevails in many parts of the country. Dowry is not just a financial transaction. It symbolizes the shared responsibility between families, where the couple's union reflects the cohesion and mutual support between the clans. Negotiations can be complex and detailed, and are often treated very seriously by family members. This curiosity from Mongolian history shows how marriage goes beyond romantic love, incorporating important social and economic elements. However, the differences between urban and rural marriage in Mongolia are notable. In rural areas, where tradition is stronger, weddings maintain many ancestral practices, with celebrations that can last days and involve the active participation of the entire community. In cities, modern influences have softened some of these traditions, with weddings more simplified and adapted to the urban rhythm. This distinction between urban and rural marriage is yet another layer of mystery in Mongolian history, where the ancient and the modern coexist in surprising ways. And so, as we look at married life in Mongolia, we can see how these rituals and traditions shape society as a whole. But what will a woman's life be like within this structure? The next topic will take us to explore the everyday lives of Mongolian women and their responsibilities. The life of a Mongolian woman is marked by a routine that balances tradition, family duties, and a strong connection with nature. In rural areas, their daily responsibilities range from caring for children to managing livestock, one of the pillars of the nomadic economy. Mongolian women are known for their resilience and adaptability, playing crucial roles in maintaining home and community life. They carry with them a sense of responsibility inherited from generations, a true curiosity of history that few outside Mongolia fully understand. Social expectations for women vary, but most women face the pressure of maintaining a balance between their traditional roles and modern demands. In more urbanized regions, Mongolian women have greater access to education and professional life. But this does not mean that their family responsibilities have diminished. The duality between tradition and modernity is a constant in the lives of these women, who navigate between the roles of mothers, wives, and workers. It is a mystery of history how they manage day after day to sustain this load with such strength. Freedoms and restrictions are also part of this complex equation. In rural areas, where tradition still reigns, women have greater freedom in choosing partners and leading their family life. However, this freedom comes with the expectation that they keep alive the traditions that sustain Mongolian culture. In cities, women enjoy more personal and professional independence, but they also face challenges balancing their careers with family demands. This dilemma is a curiosity of modern history, which reflects ongoing social changes. And now, as we understand more about the life of a Mongolian woman, we can see how extramarital relationships come into this context. How are these relationships accepted, and what impact do they have on family life? This is something that will be explored next. In Mongolia, extramarital relationships, although often discreet, are part of a complex social dynamic that defies more conventional norms. In some areas, these relationships are accepted within certain limits, especially in contexts where polyamory or nomadism favor flexibility in marital structures. What may seem surprising to more rigid cultures is, in fact, a curiosity of Mongolian history, where extramarital relationships are not always viewed with the same censorship as seen in other parts of the world. They work within a context of respect and mutual understanding. The acceptance of these relationships varies depending on the region and local tradition. In rural areas, where nomadism and family alliances continue to be fundamental, extramarital relationships can be seen as part of a larger social pact, where the survival of the clan is a priority. In cities, these practices are less common, with modern and Western influences restricting this type of behavior. The impact on family life, however, is something to be considered, because, although accepted in some contexts, these relationships can also cause tensions and conflicts as occurs in any society. Notorious cases and true stories of Mongolian historical figures involved in extramarital affairs continue to be an object of fascination. Many of these cases show how extramarital relationships were used not only as a form of personal satisfaction, but also as political and social strategies, strengthening alliances and ensuring peace between tribes. This enigma of history reveals how much more intricate human relationships are than simple definitions of right and wrong. They show how Mongolian society, both past and present, deals with the complexities of love life. And now, as we understand these dynamics, a new question arises. How were lovers chosen, and what were the dynamics of these multiple relationships? The answer to this historical curiosity will be the focus of the next topic. In Mongolia, choosing lovers and partners is a process that involves much more than simple physical attraction. In many cases, lovers are chosen based on family ties or social connections, where the aim is to strengthen alliances or maintain harmony within the clan. This practice reflects a complexity in loving relationships that few outside of Mongolia understand. A true curiosity of history that reveals the depth with which relationships are built. Choices are not made just by desire, but by a web of influences that go beyond romance. The dynamics of multiple relationships, especially in the context of polyamory, are marked by respect and negotiation between the parties involved. Balance between lovers is a key part of ensuring these relationships remain harmonious without creating unnecessary tension. In some regions, partners talk openly about their other relationships, reinforcing the idea that, for Mongolians, love and companionship can be multiple without necessarily compromising family commitment. This enigma of the story is a reflection of the emotional flexibility that permeates relationships in Mongolia. Testimonies from women and men show that these multiple relationships, when well managed, can bring a sense of freedom and fulfillment. For many Mongolian women, for example, having the opportunity to choose lovers allows them to explore different connections without the pressure of following the strict norms imposed in other cultures. For men, the practice offers a chance to expand their social ties, creating alliances that go beyond the family sphere. These true stories show us how love and partnership in Mongolia are complex and deeply rooted in local traditions. And now, as we understand these dynamics of choice and partnership, we can ask ourselves, how have modernity and globalization affected these traditions? The impact of modernity is the next point of reflection. With the arrival of modernity and globalization, relations in Mongolia have undergone significant transformations, especially in urban areas. The impact of technology, internet access, and new forms of communication has introduced Western concepts that often clash with ancient traditions. What was once a mystery of Mongolian history, protected by cultural and geographical barriers, now finds itself exposed to new ideas and external influences. This transformation has generated both conflict and adaptation, as traditions try to find their place in the modern world. Technology, especially social media and dating apps, has changed the way Mongolians relate to each other. Instead of following traditional patterns of arranged meetings or family negotiations, young Mongolians have been exploring new ways to connect with potential partners. However, this modernization also brings challenges, such as the conflict between the expectations of older generations and the desires of younger ones. The curiosity of Mongolia's modern history lies exactly in this tension between tradition and modernity, where romantic relationships are one of the most affected areas. Globalization has also brought a new view on polyamory and multiple relationships. Although these practices have deep roots in Mongolian history, contact with the West has led to these traditions being reinterpreted in light of new values. Polyamory, which was once seen as a common practice in some regions, is now mixed with modern concepts of emotional freedom and gender equality. This fusion of ideas has led many Mongolians to question what should be kept and what should be abandoned. Once again, we see the enigma of history unfolding before our eyes. And so, as we delve deeper into the impact of modernity, the question arises: how do Mongolian men deal with these changes? What is the male perspective on the evolution of polyamorous traditions? That will be our next exploration. The male perspective on Mongolian relationships, especially in the context of polyamory and romantic traditions, is marked by a mixture of cultural pride and adaptation to change. For many Mongolian men, traditions involving multiple partners are seen as a natural part of their heritage, a quirk of history that reflects their connection to ancient nomadic ways. However, with the arrival of modernity, many men have faced the challenge of balancing these traditional values with contemporary expectations of equality and mutual respect within relationships. Some men, especially in rural areas, still maintain a more traditional view, where polyamory is practiced harmoniously, without the need for great explanations or justifications. For them, relationships with multiple partners are not a reason for conflict, but rather a reflection of community life and the need to strengthen alliances between clans. However, in urban areas, men have been dealing with new social demands, where the idea of having multiple partners needs to be negotiated within a modern context. This enigma of history shows how men have to adapt to a world in constant transformation. Examples of men in polyamorous relationships reveal that for many, the biggest challenge is maintaining emotional balance between partners and ensuring that all parties involved are satisfied. It's not just about maintaining multiple relationships, but about managing these connections in a respectful and transparent way. Many men report that this ability to deal with multiple relationships requires emotional maturity and constant communication. It is fascinating to observe how these men adjust to the complexities of romantic relationships, reflecting the evolution of Mongolian traditions. And now, by understanding this male perspective, we realize that the role of the family continues to be central in all of these dynamics. How does the family react and participate in these multiple relationships? The next topic will explore this fundamental question. In Mongolia, the family occupies a central position in all loving and social decisions, being an indispensable element in multiple relationships and polyamory. From the beginning of marriage negotiations to accepting lovers, family participation is essential. In many cases, the family is the one who approves or rejects these relationships, always taking into account the well-being of the clan. This dynamic reflects a curiosity in Mongolian history, where love and relationships are not just individual, but part of a larger social network that involves all close relatives. Families' reactions to multiple relationships vary according to region and context, but in more traditional areas, families tend to support these decisions as long as they follow established customs. Family acceptance is seen as a way of maintaining cohesion between clans, where extramarital or polyamorous relationships are understood as a means of strengthening alliances. In urban areas, families are more divided, with many young people preferring to follow their own choices, often without the direct approval of their parents. This contrast is a conundrum of modern Mongolian history, where tradition and modernity tensely coexist. Stories of family support are common, especially in situations where the family understands that multiple relationships bring benefits to the clan. In these cases, relatives not only accept but actively encourage new connections, seeing them as an opportunity to expand their social and economic networks. On the other hand, there are also stories of conflicts, where families oppose these practices, generating tension between generations. These family conflicts are part of a larger narrative about how Mongolian society deals with the changes and challenges of modern relationships. And so, in understanding the crucial role of the family, it becomes clear that there are also legal issues involved. How do laws in Mongolia treat marriage and polyamory? What are the rights and duties of women in these relationships? We will explore these questions in the next topic. The legal aspects of marriage and polyamory in Mongolia are a reflection of the complex interplay between tradition and modernity. Although monogamous marriage is the norm in the legal system, polyamorous practices, especially in rural areas, still find space in certain social contexts. Mongolian law, influenced by international standards, does not officially recognize polyamory, but in many cases, communities continue to practice these traditions discreetly. This mystery of legal history in Mongolia shows us that, even with the advancement of legal norms, traditions still find ways to coexist. When it comes to women's rights and duties, Mongolian legislation has advanced considerably in recent years, ensuring greater protection for women, both within marriage and outside of it. Women have guaranteed rights in matters of divorce, property, and child custody, something that was not always guaranteed in the past. However, in polyamorous contexts, these rights are not always easily applicable, as multiple relationships do not have formal recognition. This legal dilemma creates a conundrum of modern history, where the legal system struggles to adapt to social realities. Relevant legal cases involving marriages and polyamory have emerged in recent years, highlighting the need for greater adaptation of laws to deal with these issues. While most of these cases involve urban areas, where modernization has pushed for change, in rural areas, courts often adopt a more flexible stance, taking into account local traditions. This disparity between what the law prescribes and what is practiced shows how Mongolian society navigates between modernity and its ancestral roots. And now, as we explore these legal issues, we see that religious beliefs also play a significant role in how relationships and polyamory are viewed. How does religion influence love practices in Mongolia? Religion and spirituality have a profound influence on romantic relationships and polyamory in Mongolia. Shamanism, one of the country's oldest spiritual practices, and Tibetan Buddhism, which arrived later, shaped Mongolian thinking regarding issues of family, love, and spiritual connection. For Mongolians, spiritual rituals are an integral part of their lives, often guiding important decisions such as marriage and choosing partners. This mystery of Mongolia's spiritual history reveals how religious traditions continue to influence love practices today. Shamanic rituals, in particular, are often used to bless marriages and protect family ties. These spiritual practices not only ensure the couple's prosperity, but also help maintain balance between the natural and spiritual forces that govern nomadic life. Tibetan Buddhism, with its emphasis on compassion and harmony, offers a more structured perspective on relationships, suggesting that inner peace and mutual respect are fundamental to the success of unions. This combination of religious beliefs creates a curiosity of Mongolian history, where spiritual traditions coexist with social practices. However, there are also conflicts between loving traditions and religion. For many Mongolians, especially the most religious, multiple relationships can conflict with Buddhist teachings about loyalty and respect. These conflicts are especially evident in urban areas, where religious influences are strongest, and Mongolians need to balance their love practices with their spiritual beliefs. This dilemma is a conundrum of modern history, where old and new clash in unexpected ways. And so, by understanding the influence of religion, we see that education also plays a fundamental role in how these issues are passed on to new generations. How are polyamory and romantic traditions approached in Mongolian schools? This will be the next topic to be explored. Education in Mongolia has transformed over the years. especially when it comes to topics such as polyamory and romantic traditions. In more rural areas, where traditions are passed down orally from generation to generation, formal education about relationships is minimal, and the practice of polyamory is still seen as a natural part of life. Urban schools, on the other hand, influenced by modern curricula, approach the topic more broadly, teaching about relationships in a more global context. This discrepancy in education reflects a curiosity of Mongolian history, where ancient traditions coexist with modern influences. Educational programs on relationships and family, especially in urban areas, have adapted to social changes, trying to balance respect for traditions with acceptance of new concepts. However, polyamory is still a sensitive topic and rarely discussed explicitly in classrooms. Schools prefer to focus on topics such as monogamy and mutual respect within marriage, leaving polyamory in a gray area where few dare to discuss it. This mystery of educational history in Mongolia reveals the difficulty of reconciling the old with the new. For new generations, the impact of this lack of formal discussion about polyamory can create a certain distance from older traditions. Young Mongolians who grow up in urban areas often find themselves more inclined to adopt Western values of monogamous relationships, setting aside the practices their ancestors followed. This enigma of modern history reveals how education, or lack thereof, can shape future generations and their views on love and relationships. The training of young Mongolians continues to be a field where traditions and external influences come into constant tension. And now, as we understand how education shapes views on polyamory, we must ask ourselves, how do these practices affect the health and well-being of women involved in multiple relationships? The next topic will explore this issue in more depth. The well-being of women involved in polyamorous relationships in Mongolia is a complex issue, covering both physical and emotional aspects. Women, especially in more traditional areas, often face challenges related to balancing their family responsibilities and their multiple relationships. Physical health is a crucial element, as the nomadic lifestyle in many regions requires considerable effort. Caring for livestock, land, and relationships at the same time can be exhausting, placing significant pressure on these women. However, the curiosity of Mongolian history is how, despite these difficulties, many find the strength and resilience to maintain this life. From a psychological and emotional point of view, women in polyamorous relationships can experience a mixture of feelings, ranging from satisfaction with freedom in love choices and social pressure to maintain these connections. In areas where polyamory is still common, there is strong community support, which helps women deal with these emotional responsibilities. However, in more urban regions, where traditions are becoming less common, polyamory can be viewed with suspicion, which has a negative emotional impact. This enigma of modern history reveals how social context profoundly affects these women's well-being. Furthermore, healthcare specific to polyamorous women is not widely discussed or addressed in the Mongolian healthcare system. In more isolated areas, where traditions prevail, access to medical care is limited, and many health problems end up being treated within the community itself. A lack of formal support can create additional difficulties, especially in relation to reproductive health and disease prevention. This is yet another example of how the physical and emotional health of these women is closely linked to the traditions and social context in which they live. Now that we've explored physical and emotional well-being, a new question arises. How do foreigners view these loving traditions and polyamory in Mongolia? The next topic will explore this external perception and the culture shock that can occur. Foreigners' perception of romantic traditions and polyamory in Mongolia is often marked by culture shock and fascination. For those who come from cultures where monogamy is the norm, Mongolian practices may seem strange or even incomprehensible at first glance. Flexibility in relationships, especially when it comes to polyamory, tends to provoke a mix of curiosity and confusion. Many visitors come across this mystery of Mongolian history without really understanding the cultural and historical roots that support these practices, which often leads to hasty judgments. Comparing Mongolia's love culture with other parts of the world reveals profound contrasts. In many Western societies, monogamy is seen as the standard, and any practice that deviates from this rule tends to be questioned. However, for Mongolians, the history of their romantic relationships and the practice of polyamory have a meaning that transcends simple personal relationships. They are rooted in political alliances, survival strategies, and community values. This contrast is a curiosity of history that makes many foreigners need time to understand the depth of these traditions. Stories of culture shock are common, especially among tourists who visit rural areas of Mongolia and encounter practices they consider outdated or strange. However, for Mongolians, these traditions are vital parts of their identity, and any questioning is viewed with some skepticism. When trying to explain these practices to foreigners, many Mongolians end up facing a cultural barrier, as polyamory and multiple relationships are viewed through very different lenses. This enigma of modern history is a reflection of how Mongolian traditions are, at the same time, unique and challenging for those who observe them from the outside. And now, when considering this external perspective, we begin to see how the media has portrayed these traditions and relationships. The next topic will explore how polyamorous women in Mongolia are represented in the media, and the impact of this representation on society. The representation of polyamorous women in Mongolia in the media has been a sensitive topic, reflecting both cultural traditions and modern tensions. Films, series, and documentaries that touch on the subject generally try to balance respect for Mongolian traditions with the curiosity that these practices arouse in international audiences. However, the way these women are portrayed can vary greatly, ranging from a more conservative view, which keeps traditions untouched, to a more critical approach, which questions the place of these practices in the contemporary world. This mystery of modern history continues to fuel debates about the image of these women in the media. Films and series that portray love life in Mongolia, especially in rural areas, tend to romanticize the simplicity of nomadism and the role of women in these societies. However, these representations often do not capture the nuances and complexities of multiple relationships. Documentaries, on the other hand, sometimes offer a more authentic view, exploring how women deal with their responsibilities within polyamory, but even they can't escape a Western lens that can distort reality. This curiosity of media history reveals how Mongolia is viewed exotically, but not always accurately. The impact of these representations on Mongolian society is also significant. As more international productions begin to explore Mongolian traditions, many young people are questioning whether these practices still have a place in modern Mongolia. Some see media exposure as a way to preserve and share their traditions with the world, while others consider it a cultural invasion that distorts and simplifies the complexities of polyamorous relationships. This enigma of media history reveals the tensions that arise when traditional culture meets a global lens. And now, as we understand how the media portrays these women and their relationships, we must explore the challenges and achievements they face in their everyday lives. The next topic will address the difficulties and victories of these women in contemporary Mongolian society. Polyamorous women in Mongolia face a number of challenges, both in the context of their relationships and in the broader society. The pressure to balance traditional expectations with the demands of modernity is immense, and these women are often placed in a position where they need to justify their choices. In rural areas, where polyamory is still accepted in some circles, the challenge is keeping these traditions alive without them being seen as outdated or unnecessary. This dilemma is a curiosity of Mongolian history, where the struggle to preserve traditions conflicts with the growing influence of Western norms. Despite the difficulties, many Mongolian women have found ways to overcome obstacles and gain a respected position in their communities. The leadership role that some play, both in relationships and in social life, is a reflection of their resilience and determination. Feminist and activist movements have also emerged, fighting to ensure that women have the rights and freedom to choose their forms of relationships. These achievements, although still developing, show how polyamory and other loving traditions can coexist with modern rights, challenging history's conundrum that progress necessarily entails abandoning the past. Feminist movements in Mongolia have played a key role in ensuring that these women are not marginalized for their choices. These movements offer support and guidance so that they can live fully and with dignity without fear of judgment or repression. At the same time, these feminist groups are helping to redefine the role of women in Mongolian society, creating a space where traditions can be reinterpreted in light of contemporary values. This is one of the great achievements of modern history in Mongolia, where women are writing a new chapter in their own narrative. And now, as we consider these challenges and achievements, we must ask ourselves, what does the future hold for relations in Mongolia? The future of relations in Mongolia promises to be a fascinating encounter between tradition and modernity. As Mongolian society continues to transform, influenced by global forces and internal changes, love practices are also likely to evolve. New generations are growing up in an environment where globalization brings different ideas about relationships, while still being strongly influenced by the traditions of their ancestors. This tension between old and new creates a curiosity in modern history, where the future of relationships seems to be in constant motion. New generations have shown a greater openness to questioning traditional norms, while still maintaining a certain respect for the practices of their ancestors. Some young Mongolians, especially those living in urban areas, have adopted monogamy as a relationship ideal, reflecting Western influences. At the same time, in rural areas, polyamorous traditions continue to be passed down from generation to generation. This enigma of history reveals a divided Mongolia, where the future of relations is being written at different paces, depending on where one lives. The role of new technologies cannot be underestimated either. With increasing access to the internet and social media, young Mongolians are more connected to the world than ever before. This means they have access to a variety of views on love and relationships, which may influence how Mongolian love traditions are interpreted in the future. However, Mongolia's deep traditions, with its rich history of multiple relationships and family alliances, still have room to adapt and coexist with these new influences. And now, as we reflect on the future of relations in Mongolia, we have come to the conclusion that although traditions may evolve, they will not disappear so easily. The next step is to look at the final reflections on everything that has been discussed so far, analyzing the impact of these traditions and the message they leave for the future. Throughout our journey through the history of romantic relationships in Mongolia, we were witnesses to a fascinating enigma of history. We have seen how ancient traditions, shaped by centuries of nomadism and family alliances, continue to profoundly influence modern life. Each practice, from marriage to polyamory, is an expression of the rich cultural tapestry that makes up Mongolia. The reflection that emerges is that these traditions are not mere remnants of a distant past, but rather part of a living and pulsating identity, which continues to evolve as the world changes around it. The impact of these traditions on contemporary relationships shows us that, no matter how much globalization tries to standardize customs, Mongolia's cultural roots remain strong. Women in particular play a crucial role in maintaining these practices while fighting for more space and freedom in a rapidly modernizing society. It is interesting to observe how, despite the challenges, they have achieved notable victories, redefining their roles without losing sight of the value of traditions. As we look to the future, we may wonder how long these traditions will continue and how new generations will continue to reinterpret them. What is clear is that in Mongolia, the past and present are inextricably linked, and the evolution of these relationships will be a unique blend of continuity and innovation. The curiosity of Mongolian history lies precisely in this capacity for adaptation, where the old and the new meet in a constant dance. Now that we have explored this rich history and tradition, the message remains that love and relationships in any society are always shaped by contexts greater than just the individual. Mongolia teaches us that there is always more than one way to love, and that history, with its mysteries and enigmas, continues to guide us.
Hey explorers, if you love discovering the amazing curiosities and stories we share here on Exploring Nations, how about supporting the channel with just $1? This small gesture can make a big difference and is essential to keep this content going. Without your support, our journey might be cut short. And there's more. When you shop on Amazon, use our special link. It costs you nothing extra, plus you get an exclusive discount and it helps us out a lot. The links for donations and Amazon are pinned in the first comment. Don't let this adventure stop, we're counting on you. Subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and drop us a comment.